Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. On November 9th, 1864, the day after the presidential election, Americans awoke to early results in their newspapers from loyal states across the country. While they slept or tossed and turned through the night in anticipation of which direction the country would go, uncounted miles and miles of telegraph wires carried the latest information reported in local county voting precincts up through towns and cities across the country. For Americans of 1864, the telegraph delivered close to real time results, an unprecedented achievement comparable to the internet in our generation. The stakes in 1864, the election, were high. Nothing less than the life and future of the Constitution was at stake. On one side, incumbent President Abraham Lincoln pledged to continue the struggle to put down the rebellion and bring the Confederate States back into the Union fold, no matter the cost in blood and treasure. On the other side, George Brinton McClellan, the major general who once commanded the largest U.S. Army in the field, the Army of the Potomac, in the early war Peninsula and Antietam campaigns, was poised to end the war with a negotiated peace deal that would recognize the Confederate States as an independent and sovereign nation. I want to read a sampling of the news reports to you from November 9th. These are the same words read by millions of citizens about one of the most consequential events in history, an election by, for, and of the people in the midst of a civil war with standing armies in the field. So let's begin in Massachusetts, the Fall River Daily Evening News. This is titled "The Election." All night long, the mysterious wires that have conferred upon humanity something like an omnipresence have been throbbing over mountain and valley with the burden of a nation's fate and bearing the tidings that will gladden the hearts of millions. A presidential election is always a matter of deep interest to the American people, and individual responsibility is on that occasion more fully felt than on any other. It is desirable that this should ever be the case, seeing that the power wielded by the humblest citizen of the Republic on the day of election is greater than the fiat of a king. The election of yesterday has been the subject of deep reflection and earnest discussion among the people for months that are past, and the result reached is a calm, well-considered verdict emanating from the intelligence and patriotism of the nation. One of the immediate results of the verdict pronounced by the ballot box will be to elevate the American character immeasurably in the eyes of all nations of the earth. They will behold with astonishment a marvelous condition of society among a people whose nationality is not quite a century old, yet who are more under the government of mind and morals than any other nation on earth. In the midst of a gigantic civil war, carrying sorrow into every family and demanding sacrifice of every man, this people have calmly met in their sovereign capacity and through the ballot box have announced to all the world that they are master of themselves and mean to preserve the glorious liberties bequeathed by their fathers. The triumphant election of Abraham Lincoln is the doom of treason, the doom of human slavery, which has been so long our sin, our curse, and the cause of our deep humiliation among the nations. It will be seen from the returns received that the country is redeemed, or rather that we are now made fully aware that the saving power had never for a moment left the people, and that on great questions of national interest, the masses are sound at the core and always may be trusted with safety. So there's a Massachusetts newspaper. Now, let's move to the National Republican of Washington, D.C. The title, "The Grand Result." We have the inexpressible satisfaction today of congratulating the country and the friends of political justice throughout the world upon the reelection of Abraham Lincoln to the presidency. If any of our friends have felt a degree of solicitude for the result, their minds are now at rest. We have never doubted for a moment the good Union cause would triumph. The people willed, they could not do otherwise, that the Union should live, that the government should move onward, and that the martyrdom of their sons and brothers upon the bloody battlefield should not now be repudiated. The people have nobly repudiated instead the traitors who sympathize with the Southern insurgents and the cravens who squeal about taxation and who would fain stop the war and allow the insurrection to triumph after so many better men than themselves have given their lives to the sacred cannon. In order to save their paltry dimes, the people have said that an armistice shall not be declared in order that the rotting and perishing institution of slavery may be rehabilitated. The people have decreed that the Southern states shall not be allowed to gather strength and finally to achieve their independence through a cessation of hostilities and negotiations between Northern copperheads and Southern traitors. Now, let's move to another newspaper, this one, the Portland Daily Press in Maine. The presidential election, the administration triumphantly sustained. Lincoln and Johnson elected by an overwhelming majority. According to all appearances, the day's work of yesterday was one of the most glorious in our history. The voice of a free and loyal people has been heard, and it is decidedly in favor of sustaining the government and opposed to all compromises with rebels in arms and all armistices for the benefit of treason. As might be expected, the New England states roll up heavy majorities for the Union candidates. In Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont, at the present writing, 12 o'clock midnight, the majorities are largely increased upon the last vote in those states. In New Hampshire and Connecticut, the vote is closer than that in the other New England states, but still their majorities are emphatic and decisive. Of course, Rhode Island is all right, as was to be expected. From the field, in relation to which the greatest anxiety was felt, the indications are most cheering. In New York City, where the Democrats claimed 60,000 majority, McClellan gets a majority of not over 36,600, which augurs an overwhelming defeat in the state. So far, we have heard no disturbance, no riots, no interference with the rights of a free people. The government was forewarned of danger, a danger imminent and threatening, and being forewarned, it was forearmed, and this circumstance, no doubt, has ensured a peaceable vote and save our large cities from riots and bloodshed. Now here's the Wheeling Daily Intelligencer out in Wheeling, West Virginia, relatively new state, 2 years old, titled The Election. The election yesterday, so far as we have been able to ascertain, was all that the friends of fairness and good order could possibly have desired. Many good citizens apprehended from the deep interest taken in the contest that the election could scarcely pass off without some manifestations of riot and disorder. We are glad to be able to announce that these fears were not realized, at least to any considerable extent. As will be seen, the vote is much larger than the cast in the late state election. We do not believe that a fuller vote was ever given in the county. Every man turned out, and the active men on both sides worked like beavers. So there's the view from West Virginia. Here's the view in Hartford, Connecticut. The election passed off quietly in this city. No disturbance occurred at either of the voting places, and there were fewer cases of assault and battery common upon election days than might reasonably have been expected, considering the exciting campaign which has prefaced the election. The presence of the police force in goodly numbers at each voting district acted, no doubt, as a panacea upon those who are naturally inclined to display their belligerent qualities. For contributing to the quiet and peace of the city, the police are deserving of credit, They performed their duties well in every respect, acting promptly and efficiently whenever occasion demanded. Now let's move to Pennsylvania, the Lancaster Examiner. The election yesterday resulted in a most brilliant victory, one that has no parallel in the history of the country. The loyal people of the North, casting aside former party prejudices and predilections, have united in supporting the acts and measures of the present administration in its effort to crush the rebellion. They have most emphatically declared that there shall be no compromise, no cessation of hostilities, no armistice, no convention of states looking to the settlement of our national difficulties. They have solemnly declared that Grant, Sherman, Sheridan, and the noble men of the Army and Navy of the United States will be recognized. In one word, they have, by their action at the polls, proclaimed to Jefferson Davis, his Confederate traitors, and the whole world their determination to put down the rebellion by force of arms. Above all, they have sustained the Emancipation Proclamation of President Lincoln and declared in thunder tones that slavery, the cause of the rebellion, shall no more curse the only free republic on God's earth. At the time of going to press, we have only partial returns from our own and other states, but they are sufficiently significant to justify us in saying that all the states in the Union have gone for Lincoln and Johnson, with the exception of Kentucky. And one more for you from Vermont, the Burlington Free Press. Title: The Great Result. The election is over. The great civil struggle of the nation is ended, and the loyal men of the country have won a victory at the ballot box, which will tell against the rebel cause with fatal effect. No more forcible blow has been struck by our brave armies in the field since the rebellion broke out than was struck at the polls yesterday. It may take a day or two to determine the result in 3 or 4 states that have been put down as doubtful ever since the nominations were made, but as the main result, the election of Lincoln and Johnson by a great majority, without a doubt, remains. We think this result has been foreseen by the most sagacious, most wise of the Copperhead leaders, that's the Peace Party faction of the Democratic Party, for some weeks past as almost inevitable, and that their predictions to the contrary have been no better than bold lies to keep the courage of the loss, knowing ones of the rank and file, up to the fighting mark. The wave of rebel sympathy has now spent its force. It will never mount so high again. This the rebel leaders know, and their hearts will faint as they realize it. This is the great army of rebel raiders and comforters aboard, the haters of free institutions, the haters of American power and influence will soon know also. They too will see that the rebel star is soon to set in disaster and disgrace, and with the victories in the field, which our strength and the rebel weakness allows us to expect, we see not far in the distance the return of peace and union to the land. And on that note, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.